to get started. It's 5 after. I'm going to try to roll through this and be done about 1 o'clock. It's hard kind of thinking about, I'm not going to show 35 years worth of work, but some of this stuff goes back to 35 years ago, so I thought I'd reference that. And let me turn off my telephone here. I don't get distracted. In doing this, I really thought of doing this not just to show you my work, which is part of what this is, but to think about what would I tell myself if I were 30 years old, how I would, what I might want to know about what's to come. So I thought this might be a good way to present that and also show you some of the work I did and the stories that led up to the lessons that I learned. A little bit of history. Some of you all know me pretty well, a long time. Some of you may not. So I worked back in the back corner in there, working on corporate and community stuff. Real quick, I've worked for 4 firms, really 3 if you count the merger with Rose Architects and Baskervill being one thing. And some of these transitions happened at key times. I worked for a gentleman in Paducah, Kentucky, and one of the co-workers that I worked with, Tim Galvin's here. I got to point you out, Tim, and Glenn Suttonfield. I invited them today because some of this work is theirs, actually. So I worked with them at different times. I got laid off after about 6 months, the recession of 1980. Probably relocated, knocked off about 40% of the architects in the country. I moved to Richmond, and I worked for SWA Architects, where I worked with Mark Larson, Brent, Bruce, other people you might know. I'm forgetting 1 or 2, but anyway. Then I left after 2.5 years because I was tired of doing renovation work. I had enough of it. It took too long. I worked on really 3 projects in 2.5 years, and I just wanted, a young person, I wanted something more to do. So I worked for Rose Architects for the next 16 years. That first year I went to go work for Ernie, I touched 50 projects, so it was quite a change. We had a lot of work, and he kept me very busy. Then in 1999, Ernie wanted to retire, and I didn't want to take his business, so I walked the firm down the street to Baskervill, and so that's how I'm here. It's been 17 years ago now, which seems like a long, long time. I called my old buddies from the SWA days, and anyway, so that's how I got here. Timeline, just tell how old I am. I'm 58 years old now, so you know. 1980, I graduated. These are key dates, and you think about you go back and look at your career a little bit, and what are the key milestones? To me, that's what these are, the way I think about things. I got out of school in 80, I was licensed, and actually Ernie offered me ownership in the company in 1985. I was 27 years old, a little frightening at the time, but he wanted to hang on to me, I gathered. So 1991, another recession in 1990, it switched, the office went from 14 people to 5, but I started taking on more responsibility because I was one of the few left that could do that. 1996, I really shifted my position, less of a designer and more of somebody that worked with the design folks to get the projects out, put the pencil down more often than not. And when I came to Baskervill in 1999, I was sort of moved into a principal position for whatever that means for different people. But I still kept my hand in design and all these other things that I've been doing since that time. So just as a point of reference, I'm going to talk about 12 things that I learned today. And again, I'm going to watch the clock, and I feel free if you want to stop me and clarify something, but I don't want to get into a long conversation because I've got to keep moving on. So good ideas can come from anyone. That really goes back to 1981, actually, when I got laid off. I had nothing to do until I could shotgun my resumes to Richmond, and Roanoke is where I was looking. I wandered across this old house that the state owned that had been boarded up. Horses used to live in it. I was just curious about old buildings. I liked the architecture. I wanted to kind of be an archaeologist when I was young. So I went and explored it. I documented the building, really discovered cool things about it and history that went with it. And I thought, they ought to reuse this. There's a way to save this building. And so I came up with this idea, and I wrote a letter to the editor. I was right out of school 6 months. I wrote a letter to the editor, proposed it to be a welcome center because it was about 4 or 5 miles across the Illinois-Kentucky border and right on the interstate. The interstate actually went right by it, was why it was now closed off and got condemned. So I proposed that. The boss I was working with let me use the office a little bit, and so I showed him the idea, and he saw it in the paper. And about a couple months later, he happened to be at a cocktail party with the Kentucky Department of Transportation Secretary and brought up the idea and said, we got this old building. Here's an idea. What do you think of that? And so the Department of Transportation guy said, well, how much would it cost? And he gave him a rough estimate. It was actually less expensive than the new building that they were going to build, a little prototype box that was going to be near the mall. I think it was where it was located. So anyway, it happened. I had since moved to Richmond, and Tim was one of them that worked on it back then. And over the next 3 or 4 years, they restored it. It's a beautiful place. It's a nice old building. They had a wing onto the back where you would use the toilets and all of that. But the city and the politicians, it was funny to watch the newspaper articles. My dad would send me weekly a stack of papers and letters about how the community was getting behind this project. And it was kind of cool to see. The first thing I worked on was probably the most visible thing I will ever work on. I proposed as an idea. I actually never worked on it. But it got done. So it made me realize that even, I was right out of school. Nobody knew me from Adam, but I had a good idea. And my charge to you all is to take everybody's idea seriously. At least listen to it. Weigh it. It may not make sense. That's fine, but at least listen to it. And you never know where good ideas come from. Great teams make great projects. After 1990, recession again. There's a lot of recession are key dates in a career because they are up. They up people. They really move people around a lot. It changed the way firms work. 1990, our firm got down to 5 people, like I said before, and I actually went part-time. Instead of taking a pay cut, I decided to go 3 days a week so I could play golf and maybe go chase some other work that was there. So anyway, but my boss Ernie Rose said, we've got this proposal here. I don't have time to work on it. It's the Mickey Company. There are probably 30 firms going to chase it, but if you want to take time to work on it, I'll pay you $5,000 if we get it. If you do the work and we get the job. And we had no work in 1990. Nothing got built in a whole year. So we did some work. We were very busy, but we didn't have anything built. So it was a tough time. I said, I'll do it. So I did a proposal, did all the drawings, and over a period of presentations, proposals, got down to 3, got down to 2, and we got the job. And so I got to go back to work full time. And this is the project. You go back a minute. The point of the lesson here is, during this proposal stage, we had an incredible developer. It was CSX development team that I don't know exists anymore, but we had Whiting Turner Contractors, Maynard Grizzard, who was a young guy just like I was, who just put everything into it. We had an owner rep from the Mickey Company. He was out of Dayton, Ohio, who'd come down, and we'd have great meetings. I went up there about every week to a meeting. And it was just the most perfect group of people. They got along well. We went to eat out afterwards, and it was just a really easy group to work with. We had a lot of bumps along the way, as every project will, but I found that having a great team like that really is what's necessary to have a great project. You got to have a great client, a great contractor, a great owner. If you put all those together, you've got magic sometimes. If you've got a great program, too, helps. One of the things that we really, that I learned from this too, was a gentleman, he was an older gentleman architect in Charlottesville. I got the great fortune of having to go up in front of, they put a board together, like an urban design committee, and these 2 committees that they had were mostly architects that were professors at the University of Virginia. And so they put them together and made a special committee just to review our project, because it was the end of the pedestrian walkway, Main Street, where they closed it. In Charlottesville, this building was going to be at the end, to close that street on Avon Street. So it was a very important, visible building. And so they had a lot of things to tell me about how I should design a building. And but there was a gentleman, Jack Reinhardt, who was a great guy. He just worked with me personally and said, "This is how I think you might be able to steer the building." He critiqued my work in a very constructive way, and so I always respected him for that. He could have been a real jerk and tried to hone in on the design a little bit, but he was trying to mentor me throughout that process. But anyway, it's built. That sort of shows the end of the mall. How we had a very conspicuous place. We actually proposed another section that went down Market Street, down there, in addition one day. But that's the building. If you ever see it in Charlottesville, it's near the little amphitheater that they have. It's right in front. So anyway, design matters. We sometimes get in a little bubble here at Baskervill and don't really get out to see the work we do and really understand completely how it affects other people. When I was working in Ernie Rose's office, we did a lot of spec office buildings, so there were no people associated. You know, we were just designing space to be occupied by somebody in the future. Didn't really understand who the end user would be. You know, but we started doing some program work. And one project in particular was for Better Housing Coalition. And you really got to realize that what you do can make a difference with people. This was I'm going to show you this. This is not the final product. This is an apartment project called Park Lee. It's a Section 8 housing project just south of Chippenham Parkway on Route 1. It was about half occupied because there were probably people living in the upper floors of this at this time. It was that bad. This was the most crime-ridden place in Chesterfield County. A lot of drug activity happened here. The residents would basically go inside, go run into their apartments, go lock the door, and just wait till daylight would come out because there would be drug deals and all kinds of shootings and stuff happening here. So what Chesterfield County, or HUD, actually sold this project to Better Housing Coalition for $1 with the promise that they would redevelop it. So over a course of, I would say, 4 or 5 years, we did the townhomes that replaced what was there. And it's actually a project I'm still working on. Glenn actually worked on a lot of it too. Was it it's probably mid-90s, I guess, is when this was, 20 years ago. But anyway, this is what it looked like at the beginning. And what Better Housing Coalition did was to invite the residents that lived in Park Lee to be part of the committee to help design their community. A lot of guidance, of course. They got to name the streets. They had a community association that was formed. They got to work with the police department as to how to maybe set up the houses, the alleys, so you had visibility. All the things that New Urban Design really was promoting at that time. Ernie and I think one other went to Andre Duane's seminar, for lack of a better word. It's a 3-day retreat, really, where he works with you and brings all these consultants in, talks to you about urbanism and how to make things better, how to design neighborhoods so that they work better for people, make them walkable, put eyes on the street. So we went through all that. There was a landscape architect by the name of Clark Plaxco that was really the master planner at the time. But I learned a lot doing this, watching a little bit from the sidelines. And then eventually it became something that I kind of kept developing over time. But anecdotally, I'll show you, that's the site plan. It's changed over the time. As you learn things change as the economy changes. But that's the community. It went from what was Park Lee, the same people that were living in Park Lee now lived in this. It was done for a tight budget. I think it was like $45, $50 a square foot at the time, which was pretty inexpensive. A lot of money got spent, but there were grants, there were all kinds of money that was applied to this to make it work. It was actually the first Energy Star project that I ever worked on way back in the day. But you can see we tried 3 different styles of houses that were, I think Glenn and Bill maybe found from the community and brought those in. Little spaces for gatherings or playgrounds, so nobody had to walk more than a block and a half to a playground or little green space. Porches everywhere, so people park on the porch. You can see who's out walking around, so it's sort of self-policing. Where it mattered is that, anecdotally anyway, and these are just some other kind of future things we did. Where it really mattered was that they got performance statistics from the school, the elementary school that these kids went to, and they said that the improvement in the school was dramatic. They said it was nothing less than miraculous because the children felt safe. They had a comfortable place to live. They weren't in fear anymore. So, and the parents, the whole attitude of the family life and the community life, I think, makes a difference. The other thing is about the crime rates. I actually talked to, I gave a little presentation down here about 2 years ago, and I asked the person that's managing, how many police calls do you get a month nowadays? And instead of 1,000 a year that they used to get, they now get like 2 a month. And they said it's mostly because people get locked out of their cars. So that, to me, it really matters. Design matters. This is kind of a dramatic example, perhaps, but don't forget the people who we're designing for. It really is important. Senior housing, offices, it's try to make as much of a mix in this community as I can. Our job is to lead. It took me a while to really figure out that's what architects do. I've always, when I tell young people about architecture versus engineering, I said engineers know a lot about one subject, maybe a very specific subject. Architects, because we're the team leader, have to know a little bit about a lot of subjects. So we may be generalists, we have not a deep understanding, but enough to be able to converse with the people that we work with, and we're the team leader. And it took me several years to really kind of figure that out and understand it. I started with another project I worked on with Glenn, which was Dollar Tree's headquarters and distribution center. This was not yet a Fortune 500 company. They had about 200 people working in the front of a warehouse. This was the entire company at the time, down in Norfolk. And they wanted a new headquarters building because they were busting at the seams. They had a plan to grow. They had just gone public the year before, and the 3 top people in the company each had stock worth $100 million. And I went in, I was told by Ernie to go make it happen. That was my job. To go make this, manage the overall process for the client. At the end, I ended up taking the distribution center from a project management standpoint. Glenn took, I think, the headquarters building. So the two things kind of worked together at the same time. And anyway, it was, I was in one of my first meetings, programming meetings, I had about 12 to 15 people of the top executives in the company. And I was by far the least paid person in that room. And so I was a bit intimidated, quite frankly. They had a head of merchandising, the head of IT, head of everything was there. And at the end of the meeting, it was a little clunky, because I assumed that the executive vice president who hired me was going to lead the meeting. At the end of it, he said, "Mark, that was an awful meeting. From now on, you're going to run the meeting, and you have my complete blessing to just cut people off, but I want you to make the meetings as efficient, as productive as possible, to get my people back to work as soon as you can." So I did that, and he said, your job is to lead. And so, okay, you gave me license, and I took it, and anyway, so that's just show you some of the work that went along with it. This is Tom McLaughlin, who was at Ernie's office. I'll talk a little bit about him later on. One of the really great designers I've ever worked with. But he did the elevation work and sort of the space concepts inside. It's an addition we did years later onto the back, a 3-story addition around the corner. This is a client that I actually worked with. It started in 1996, I believe. We got the building done around Halloween, both buildings. And I worked with the client until about 2005, I think it was. So about 10 years working with the client. The courtyard in the back, it was just a beautiful project, working with a lot of talented people to make this happen. But that was the first experience where I really, truly was a leader of a larger effort. and I learned a lot from doing that. One, I learned not to be intimidated by people that had $100 million to their name. So we do not, we are around people a lot of times that have a lot of status, a lot of clout, but you got to get over that and do your job. That's a beautiful project, I think, that all the hands put into it. Anyway, and there's the part I got to manage, was the distribution center, which was really cool. 400,000 square feet of conveyed manufacturing. About 125 people work there for a lot of product. Over the next 10 years, like I said, I would end up doing about 8 million square feet of distribution center for this client, and 2 additions onto their office headquarters. So it was an important client to me. Anyway, know when to let others take the lead. There was a time in my career when I realized I had more talent sitting around me than I had, that was in my possession. So I started to realize we'd get better work if I put the pencil down and just kind of worked over, between Ernie, who could be a little tough to work with at times, a little bristly. If I was sort of a buffer between Ernie and the people doing the design work, and sort of help coach it a little bit. And I still put my finger into design once in a while, but I knew to start letting go. Tom McLaughlin, who some of y'all may know, a few years older than me, but he, Harvard grad, just a great gregarious guy, came and interviewed with us. I saw his portfolio and I told Ernie, you got to hire this guy. Please hire this guy. I want the talent like that in this office. We've got to have it, because we had this job and a Dollar Tree job coming up with 2 massive headquarters and I just didn't feel adequate to it. With Tom being there, I felt we can do some signature work, and so I decided to put the pencil down at that point in time and start working through people like that. I did the site planning, which is what I still do nowadays, but Ralph Higgins did a quick sketch and I took it from there and developed it, showed how it might grow over time. But again, beautiful lobby. Another example when I really decided it's time to put the pencil down was we got the Canon job in 2008. I realized my role after a while was to sort of, it takes you a little while to find out what your role is on a job like this. I went in, figured I was going to work on it, be the project manager, do everything, and I had Lisa McWork working with me on this. It was just at that time the 2 of us, and Brent. I actually worked on this project for 3 months in secret. Bob Clark didn't even know what it was I was working on. I told him, trust me, it will be good. Just don't ask, because I can't tell you. The governor wants to announce a project on May 1st or whatever the date was, and we have to be done 11 months later. And so he left me alone. I told Brent, because I needed one person in the office, another principal, to know in case I got hit by a bus what was going on. So I told Brent, and over the course of understanding the client, the first 4 or 5 meetings we went to, I brought Lisa with me, but she would not sit at the table. And our client was a 62-year-old engineer, Nancy, who was queen of the court in that room. And she was really good at what she did. And I started making Lisa sit at the table first, and after a while I made Lisa start managing the job, communicating with Nancy, because I could sense that Nancy was looking for that relationship to happen. So I backed off and let Lisa really have the client relationship there, and she did a great job. Nancy treated her as a mentor. Nancy was a mentor to her. Really, I really saw that developing, and so I let it happen. And the other part of that was the executive at the top loved to go shoot, skeet animals, whatever it was. He was a hunter. I have only picked up a .22 maybe 40 years ago, and that's not my thing. So Brent likes to shoot, so I let Brent sort of have that relationship at the top. So I just got the work done. I just made sure that everybody was doing what they needed to be, the schedules on time. I worked with the contractor a lot. But the key is to know when to let others take the lead. You can recognize this by, if you're observant, you'll see relationships develop. And you just want to do whatever's in Baskerville's best interest. Try to put your ego aside a little bit. Realize that you can do the job. You know you can do the job, but maybe it's better if somebody else takes the lead once in a while. But this is, it's a big, complicated plant. It was the probably the largest dollar project, construction dollar project I worked on. It was $95 million, and it had to be done in 11 months from the time I started working on it in secret. So it got done. Matt Robbins worked a lot on this as well. It's Matt's Bridge, which I think is a beautiful thing. It's a Japanese company and very much a Japanese culture, so we had to incorporate as much of that as we could in there. So anyway, big things start small. Ernie got a call one day from a gentleman, I think worked at Circuit City, and said, we got this idea about starting a used car lot or used car building. Would you be interested? We're calling it Rick's Used Cars or something like that. Well, Ernie said Ernie would talk to anybody for 3 or 4 hours just to give him his time, his wisdom. And so he did this, and he said, yeah, we'll do it. We've gotten to retail. We're doing some Heilig Myers work. We can do some retail. We need to diversify. So little did I know that was it didn't have a name at that time. It was just Rick's Used Cars, and went through a development with the Circuit City folks, and over the course of the year, not even that, we developed the first CarMax job. Before it had a name, I called it Auto World. Went into their war room up in Circuit City, and it was quiet as could be. We did not want anybody to find out what we were doing until the building went out of the ground, which really we got it done that way. The war room had 150, 200 names on the wall, and you could see people scratching through names, and this is, the process they went through with the consultant to get to CarMax. The colors of highway signs. Anyway, we did the first one here in West Broad Street, and it became quite something. For 10 years, it became half of our work at one point in time. Half of the volume of our work, which is always a scary thing. In case you lose a client, you don't want to lose half your work. But that's the way it evolved. Went through prototype revisions every 6 months. That's the first one out on West Broad Street. They've painted it since then, instead of a gray block, but just design work. The company now, it started as that little used car lot. They sell, let me see if I got it here. It's an important number. Yeah, they had $14 billion in sales last year. They probably are 3 or 4 times what Circuit City was at their peak. So again, something small can grow into something very large if you get in on the ground floor. It can take you for quite a ride. Another example real quick is just Mark Lindsay and I. Well, Mark did a little toilet building out at RIR. That turned into all kinds of work over time. So again, start with a little toilet building, see where it goes, and it could take you quite far. Yeah, they sell 500,000 cars a year now. We had, I think, 450 on that first lot. So learn when to say yes and no. This is maybe not what you quite think it is, but Richard Sharp, the guy I worked with at Circuit City, the head guy there, who started CarMax, he asked, I got a call one day from George Rossini, who was the design director, said, Mark, you're going to design Rick's house. I said, I don't do houses. He said, you don't understand. You're going to design a house for Rick Sharp. I said, you don't understand. I've never done a house before, and I don't know what I'm doing. I have a job. And he said, no, you really don't understand. Anyway, I went back and forth. And I said, well, let me go talk to Ernie. And Ernie was scared to death that I was going to mess up because this is a house for Rick Sharp at Bethany Beach. It's a beach house. I call it the 10,000 square foot cottage. But anyway, Ernie finally let me do it because we had no choice. We were going to do it. We had to say yes on this job. And I got it done with the minimal disruption. I did it at moonlight. It about killed me. I would meet Rick at midnight at his office because that's when he was free, and it was this kind of weird, crazy time. But it was a good project, and anyway, that's what it was going to look like. And a real quick story. I was trying to be efficient. It was my mindset to minimize costs, to make things efficient as I could. First thing I did, I showed Rick, and I whittled it down to like 9,000, 8,500 square feet. And I was real proud. I liked the way it looked, and look how much money I saved you. And he said, Mark, you don't understand. If you knew how much money I paid for this land, you know the house was irrelevant, the cost of a house. I want what I want. And so I said, yes, sir. So I held the pencil, but he designed. And this is where it ended up, a little more of a Victorian cottage than what I started with. But anyway, it got built. I've actually never been to the final product because it's in a gated community and I just don't want to go through the hassle. It's there on Bethany Beach, on the waterfront. He owns the tennis courts, all this land. Anyway, Rick passed away a few years ago, but it was a good experience still to get to know Rick pretty well.
He didn't leave you the house?
Didn't leave me the house. We actually built we did another house in Baskervill for him in Richmond, but he kept this one, I believe. When to say no. Justin Moore was the head of Philip Morris here in town, and he came to Ernie saying, I want you to design my house. And we said, okay, because we wanted his work and we wanted that connection. So I got assigned to do that. I worked with he and his wife, Jeanette, and I was out at the job site one day, and I was behind. I was too busy working on other projects, and he comes up to me and says, "Have you're about done with my drawings?" Or something I had to do. I said, and I started spinning. I started going around and said, "Well, I'm working on this." And I said, "Mark, are you finished yet? Are you done?" I said, "Well, I'm going to do this." And he said, "Mark, yes or no? Are you ready?" I said, "No, sir." And he said, "Thank you. That's all I needed." I was intimidated by him a little bit, and he was a 6'5" man, so I was a little physically intimidated too. But a nice gentleman. But I learned at that point in time, people don't really want spin. It's our job to be straight with them. You'll get they respect you if you tell them a straight story. And I learned from that point on just to you may not like what you're having to tell people. You can couch it with a little bit of frosting sometimes, but you need to be straight with folks and learn from it. That's out in the back of Loch Green. It's another gated community. You can't get back in there. But anyway, it's a nice house. 4,000 square feet made it look like a little college. It looked a lot smaller, but it's 4,000 square feet. Be persistent, but not pushy. You may recognize this building on West Broad Street. Working for the United Methodist Church. It's the first job I actually got on my own without really Andy Verney's help. I did the interview by myself, wrote the proposal by myself, and I beat Jim DePasquale one-on-one, and I felt real good about that. That was in 1999, so I would have been about 42 years old, so I felt real good about myself at that point. I was working with the committee that was headed by an architect who had turned to be a minister. They were doing a new conference center, office headquarters out on Staples Mill Road. And I went through this committee, and they liked what I was doing, said no problem, you need to go show it to the next committee, which was the people who were going to go raise the money. And I showed it to them, and it was silence, nothing. And I said, I need some feedback. And they said, have you talked to the bishop about this yet? I said, no, I didn't know I was supposed to. You need to go talk to the bishop. So anyway, I go talk to the bishop the next day. And he walks me out the front door and says, this is what I want. And I had designed this thing on the top, modern, clean, out on the site that they'd given me. And I have never done a colonial building before, and I was determined I was not going to. And I talked to my client, the architect minister. I said, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I can do this. He said, well, Mark, there's sometimes when you need to say, you need to walk away from a project. Say, no, I can't do it, won't do it. You need to have a point where you need to do that. So I said, well, I've never walked away from a project before. I want to be able to say I've designed my way out of every problem. So I took another 2 or 3 swags at it. I finally got to this, where I was comfortable and he felt like there was enough colonial reference in there we could make it work. The chimneys, the brick, we both felt pretty good about that, and that's where we ended up. But my part, it was persistence. I wasn't going to quit on the job. I didn't want to walk away from it. It was an important job to me. But I knew I had to sort of walk that line a little bit between let my ego get in the way, but also knew that it was, I needed to also kind of hold my line too. This is a project, this was about, again, built around 2000. We had great prices because we went out for bids a month after the recession of 2000 happened, so we got incredible prices. Everybody was looking for work, so it saved me. I didn't have to do any VE on this job. Anyway, KBS did the construction, did a nice job, got to meet John Gillenwater. Main control of the design process. There are different times when pressures will be on you to change things, to VE things, you'll lose control. I have to admit, there's times I've lost control of a job. I like to think I have this persuasive personality, which is not necessarily always the case, but or just a great design hand that doesn't always work. Sometimes dollars work against you. You have pressures that will work against you. And Jay and Bob Tierney will recognize this. I worked on what was collegiate pool. Anyway, went through several name changes. Bruce was the principal on this. It ended up being called GRAP, and it's something different now, I think, as well. But we worked on this for about 10 years before it actually became a real project. And so it went through several evolutions. But you know, after 10 years, you'd think you will have time to develop a plan. Once you get a real client, get the money in place, you'll have time. Well, we ended up designing the building, and they wanted to move it to this site because the site was going to be given to them, or it was where they wanted to be. So they just said, we don't have time to redesign. We're just going to put the building that you already have on this site. And it just didn't work in my mind. And but there was all this pressure from the owners to civil engineer, all these county, just to get it going, get it going. I think I threw the flag on it one weekend, and I said, this is not, nobody's going to be happy with the solution. So I spent a weekend and redesigned the building and redesigned the site. And I think it's pretty much what you see down here is the building, but we moved the site so the parking went in the back so everybody didn't have to walk around the back, pushed the building back, redesigned it so it fit this kind of odd-shaped site. And then I let go and let other people make it work. And it became, Jay did the project management, Bob Tierney did the design work on it. Became the GRAP pool that you see nowadays. I think a very nice project. And there were other pools from the contractor to do VE on it. We instead sort of chose what VE was, so we decided what we could give up rather than let the contractor and the owner make cuts. So again, you've got to keep control of a project. There are projects every now and then where you find there are limitations that are put on it. You think at first, oh, this is going to be tough. But the hardest project to design, I think, a lot of times is one that has no site, has no real parameters. You're just designing in space. You need things to kind of get you started, to box you in a little bit so you can make decisions. So sometimes these limitations can be really good opportunities. Better Housing Coalition asked us to do a project up in Church Hill, an apartment complex. We did a 3-story building, and the numbers just didn't work. We didn't get the funding on it, so they came back the next year and said, we're going to go for it again, but we're going to add 6 handicap units because we think that will make the difference between between what we did the last time and being awarded the money that they needed from VHDA and all the HUD money, all these places where they got money to make the projects happen. So we did this. What the requirements that TKA saw when I put on me were, it's going to be fully accessible, all 6 or 7 units were going to be fully accessible. They're going to be earthcraft designed. This is in a historic district. You've got to be reviewed by VHDR, the Department of Historic Resources. I got it backwards, anyway. What was it? It's got to follow the Universal Design Guidelines, too. So all of those different things, and there was something else, I can't remember what it was, but all those requirements on it. On 7 little units, it was 600 square foot. So it was only a 4,000 square foot project.
Did they tell us net zero at the time?
Net zero. That was the other one. It's like we'd never done a net zero, so it had to use no energy over the course of a year. So the 3-story building with the 1-story part across the street, that was going to be part of one overall project. Well, actually. Found that those limitations really sort of challenged me, maybe work a little harder, make it, I thought, have a really nice little project. And I got a note back, the VHDR was really tough on me because they didn't want it to look historic in any way. They wanted it to look like a shed, the lumber shed, which is what was here before. you know, people don't want to live in a lumber shed, a metal lumber shed, but we used some materials, and by the time we got through, Bill actually wrote me a note, and I framed it for a while because I had such a time with him. But he said, this is a great example of how you make something work, and he was just glowing, and I was like, I can't believe this after all I went through. But anyway, it's a neat project, and one we've used for marketing purposes a lot here at Baskervill, but use this kind of the gray silver brick to recall the metal shed a little bit. There's metal on the sides. There's 96 solar panels on the roof with 6, they were PV, and then 6 hot water solar panels. A little nod, I'll go back, a little nod to the street front on here, but it was a muse running down the side for the other 5 units. I thought it just worked out quite nicely, and the residents, they were sold out quickly. We had to actually, the interior shot here is of actually the building across the street because they were all occupied at the time before we could get the photographs made. So we sort of staged it where it looked like it was that unit for our marketing purposes. But they were nice, clean units that serve a purpose. 600 square feet, which is all that the math actually forced us into that through the HDA math. To get the job, you had to be like, there was a formula, and you had to whittle it down to an exact square footage to be the most efficient. So again, lots of inputs, but anyway. Down to the last couple. The last 2 are a little more personal to me. Be willing to take a risk. I've mentioned recessions a couple times. I've been through 4 of them now. None of them are fun. I got out of school in 1980 in a recession, a hyperinflation that turned into a recession. 1989 to 90 was the savings and loan crisis that just wiped a lot of architects out of business. 2000, 2001, which the dot-com bust and the 9/11. And then we had 2007. So those 4 were pretty eventful times. Well, in 2009, I was ready to build a house. If I was ever going to do it, I had saved and prepared for this for about 25 years. And so I decided it's time to do it. If I'm ever going to do it, it has to be now. I know it's a recession and it's risky for an architect in the middle recession to spend money on a house. But I have the time now because I didn't have a lot of work. So, and the prices got cheaper. The recession happened and prices started going down as we moved and bought a house in Westover Hills. It was a brick rancher, and we lived in it for a couple of years with the notion we were going to add on to it. So the point is, I'd learned enough over the years. I was willing. It was a calculated risk, but I took it, and I knew we would get great prices during that time. I just needed to make sure I kept my job. Or that Carrie kept hers. She actually lost her job during that time, but she found one quick enough working for the Army. When Reynolds shut down and moved to Louisville, she'd worked there 27 years and lost her job. So it was a little risky on our part, but it was I had enough confidence, I guess, in what we were doing and enough history behind me to know it would work. So I also took a design risk on this. This was a house we bought, lived in for a couple of years. It was a nice house, very solid bones. That was what every 1960s family wanted. But my wife, who is not necessarily a modernist, I had to sort of negotiate with her on how this was going to be. So I went the first, I've never shown this to any other architect friends here, but I sort of went that way with it. I was going to add a second floor, take the roof off, add a second floor to it, and do something that would maybe feel traditional a little bit in that neighborhood. But the street had a lot of variety on it. It was one street in Richmond almost, where you had modern houses. There was like a Frank Lloyd Wright type house next to a 60s house, next to a sort of 40s house, next to a Tudor house. It was all kinds of things. So I felt if you're going to explore, you could do it on this street and get away with it, as long as you do something that's, you know, timeless or classic. So anyway, that's what I did at first, and I just wasn't happy with that. So I started building other models. Built this model here, and my wife one day walked into my place where I was working and said, "Oh, I could live there." I was like, "Thank you." It's like, I've done it. The hardest client of my life. I finally succeeded. So anyway, I had that, the upper design. I hired a great contractor. He was an architect and contractor, Michael Shearman, and it was great because he understood me. I could talk architecture with him, and he but he was a contractor, so he knew how to build what I was talking about and knew where I would be willing to compromise and where I would not be willing to compromise. So it was a great partnership in that I took it through schematic design and into design development and let him finish the job. Again, know when to let the pencil down and let somebody else do it, because I wanted him to own the project too. So it wouldn't, if there was something that didn't work out, it was on him. So give him some responsibility on it. So he priced it, and I realized I was 50% over budget. Can't do that. So I spent the next month redesigning the project and got it down to the number that I could handle and choke down. So I did a lot of the drawings I did, and that's the house that I live in now. We've been there for about 6, 7. We moved in on April 14th, 2010. No, I'm sorry. Anyway, we've been there about 6 years now. So that's the house. Lots of fun. The copper, I was just fascinated by the copper, how it devolved over time, how it turned. It's also solid brown, kind of a penny color now, which I knew would be at nighttime, kind of cool. It sits up. The key about that parcel is that you can see the river from 2 different angles there. It sits up high enough you can see over the houses across the street and diagonal. So that's why we wanted to add the second floor to get that view of a river. So I took the risk, and I'm very happy with what we did. Interior, space, kitchen, dining room. It's a small house. It's probably only 2,400 square feet, counting a room down to unfinished, well, a room that's finished in the basement we've never used. So it's a 3-bedroom house, but it's, I think, got some presence, and it's wide open because we entertain folks from church a lot. Anyway, so stairs, got some kind of modern elements inside as well, but enough comfort and warmth that my wife is happy about all that. A lot of wood. So anyway, our street is undergoing a conversion right now. There are 5 houses out of 10 on my street that are being either torn down and rebuilt completely or renovating dramatically. So I sort of have to live through now what they went through 6 years ago. So I'm getting my turn to do that. They actually tore down 2 houses on my street to rebuild because they have a view. So kind of exciting times. Find balance in your life. This is more of a personal charge to you, to find a place where you're comfortable at work, have a career, all the kind of things that you expect, but don't let that be the only thing that drives you. I have, from an early time, had lots of role models and mentors that sort of guided me to different places of service outside of work, and I'm very happy they did that. One thing is to learn to say yes to some of those opportunities, because they help you in your career more than you would know, just through knowing people, getting to hear other points of view, getting to see parts of the city that you may not see if you stay in your little bubble here at work. Or in your house. You got to get out and experience Richmond, experience the city. I mean, Bruce does it by being a councilman. You get all kinds of experiences that you never would have gotten if you hadn't done that. And I've sort of found that the same way. So I'm going to show you some of the things that I have done over the last 30 or so years, that kind of fun things. Well, you know this, as Sheena and the Explorer program. We started that about 11 years ago as a way to, again, use what you know and find a way to give it to other people or to share that with other people. It's been one of the really kind of cool experiences, taking high school kids that may think they want to be an architect or interior designer and giving them some exposure, some real life experience about how that might be. That's Lavisha, who I've mentored through the AIA program, young architect with Kelso and Easter. Whoops, went the wrong way. I'm a Cub Scout leader, or Boy Scout leader, if you didn't figure it out by now. I've been doing that for 33 years, 34 years, different things, but it's a way to serve and keep working with young people, but also working. Dave has actually been through one of the programs we worked on together. But it's one of those things I really find satisfaction. You do get burnt out if you say yes too many times, so learn when to stop saying yes, or to change to something else. There's times where you get burnt out for doing one thing too much. You need to shift to do something that's new and challenging. To me, it's like, find what gives you energy. If it gives you energy at the end of it, then that's a good thing. You need to keep doing that, or do something like that. So I took a group of young people, 35 scouts to Japan last summer. That's in Hiroshima. I was a Wood Badge course director, and which is the adult training program that we have. I've been doing that for 10 and 12 years now, off and on. Really, it's probably helped me at work more than anything I've ever done. It's a scout program, and it's just a really cool thing. Dave went through that, was on staff with me. These are paintings that I do. I do watercolors off the posters. They were really started for a scouting experience I had, and the Wood Badge program that I was working on asked me to do one at the end of each course. And I'm on number 11 now, and I do one about every year and a half. And they're all hanging up down at the Scout office, the originals are. And there's one I did just recently that's not on here, but these give me joy. They're about 80 hours of work a piece, but they're a gift to other people that are involved in this program, and they treasure them, is from what I understand. And anyway, it's again another sort of side interest. One of the things my wife and I do with our house is we invite the VCU international students in 3 times a year: Easter, 4th of July, and Thanksgiving. So we open our house to about 50 to 80 people. That little house, it's full, but it's full of energy. It's given them a community, a way to network with each other, find friendships, and we do that through our church. But I just find it's a very kind of empowering thing for them. They're here for 2 years, and we started doing it when I heard that 80% of international students will never set foot in an American home. That's pretty staggering to think. They're here for 2 to 3 years or more, and they never see what American experience really is like. So this is part of what we do. I was playing Moses in preschool. I'm a preschool teacher down on the bottom. Been doing that for 30 years with 4-year-olds. Love that. I'm Mr. Mark on Sundays. And my wife and I do an event every year. We sponsor and pay for an event for Blackwell Elementary School, the 5th grade students, their graduation at the end of every, like in the last day of school. They bus them over to our church, and we had some of our volunteer friends and the cook staff at church throw them a party, basically, a very formal party. They have to learn how to do their silverware. The boys have to learn how to scoot the chairs out for the young ladies, and all these sort of formal things. They get training on that before they come. So this is a big deal for them. It's something they really look forward to before they go off to middle school, and the wasteland that can be sometimes. But anyway, last things. Out of that Wood Badge program that I did, leadership program, I had sort of found the value in that, the way it changed me and the way I saw it affect other people. I brought that to, I talked to my minister at church. I said, we need a Wood Badge program like that here at church. And he said, yes, we do. Here's 6 people, go. And so I authored a program at church that now is in its 3rd year called Legacy of Leadership. It's a way to energize young people, empower them, people that are like emerging leaders. The pastor identifies them with about 20 to 25 people every year, and a 5-day course that we put them through, and it's been a really one of the more important things I've ever done. But it also, again, evolved out of that Scout program. Renovated the church sanctuary 2 years ago with a team of architects and people from the church. That was an experience. And then this is just a trip I went on to South Africa a few years back, mission trip at church, something that I find. But again, this is all a way of finding balance. Again, it goes back to it's work. You got to find work, family, of your extracurricular activities. Find that balance that works for you, and don't be afraid to be of service to other people. And that's it. Any questions? Thank you, guys. So I got done before 1 o'clock, too.